Many Zeta view humans as being is temporarily neutralized using the Kalanta codes. Perceptual interference is orchestrated. During this sensual interruption, the human mental awareness, mental body, becomes momentarily disengaged from the biological structure. Mind or mental self-awareness is placed in a temporary state of suspended animation. It is put on hold within the three-dimensional frequency, while the biological organism is taken into a different dimensional frequency or through a time portal. This part of the process is what creates the experience of a seeming separation of bodies, often reported in abduction cases. It seems as though an astral body is being pulled out of a physical body, the same experience known as astral projection. Not all abduction episodes contain this particular feature, but many do. It is here that many abductees become confused as to whether their experiences were really real physical events or whether they were mental events, hallucinations, dreams, or excursions into the astral plane. The reality of what is occurring is that the energy field of the mind and that of the cellular pattern of the flesh are being put on different speeds, different rates of vibrational oscillation. Mind field is accelerated, its rate of oscillation increased, which creates the sense data of the lessening of density. Meanwhile, the energetic field of the molecular structure is decelerated, its rate of oscillation slowed, creating the bodily sense data of an increase in density. The oscillation rates of both of these energy fields are held within a certain interval or within a particular ratio, which temporarily disengages the connection between them. Mental awareness and the body consciousness thus are split, placed within two separate frequency bands. Mind is held at a frequency higher than that of the third dimension, its oscillation rate is increased. While the mind is accelerated and tuned into a higher frequency pattern, the body is decelerated, its oscillation rate slowed, tuning it to a lower frequency. In greater terms, this maneuver constitutes moving the mental awareness into the future while placing the cellular consciousness in the past. After the particular ratio between body and mind speeds is reached, the body is then quickly accelerated in oscillation, enabling it to leap through a time or dimensional portal. Thus, by manipulating the speeds of various aspects of the bioenergetic field, a window in time is created, which enables the body matter to move through portals without its form being destroyed. Abduction cases that utilize the above manipulations, the physical body is taken, but it is shapeshifted, literally turned into light formations within another time and dimensional frequency. It is first taken backward in time to its pre-matter form, then catapulted from that condition into the future of that form where the desired manipulations are made, and then moved from that future perspective backward toward the present, where it is then re-engaged to the mental energy aspects that had been put on hold to await the body's return. Alterations to the body are actually carried out while the body is in a non-solid form existing as light and sound patterns, but upon the integration of the body with the mental facility, these alterations then take on the symbol codes that give the illusion of form. Alterations of light appear in memory as the medical experiments so often recalled in abductions. The body and mind, these events will indeed appear as if they had taken place physically, and in one sense they have, for the physical sensory imprint is valid within the present moment focus of the consciousness. Remembered events were real, but they took place within the future where matter solidity had not yet caught up with them. Intersecting these future events with a conscious mind focused in the present, the events will immediately be translated into the codes of the mental body, thus giving solidity of form to the remembered events. Memory is stored within the body cells and DNA, and so the events experienced in a future time are recorded there, but they will be remembered consciously only as the mental body grows to the point where it is able to translate that stored data into symbols. The mental body can only translate impulses that fall within its range of frequency, so within abductions of this kind, the remembered events will unfold over time as the mental awareness grows and expands its frequency rate to translate a greater variety of impulse packages. Alterations that take place during such experiences may take the form of physical manipulations, as well as that of remembered events. Scars may appear upon the body as the organism reintegrates the cellular and mental codes. Implants of devices may be located within the body. Fetuses may be found missing. Body will translate into physical reality the events it has encountered and that are stored within its imprint, whether those events occurred in the past or the future. In present time you may fall, and immediately your body produces a bruise, which seems to be the result of the fall. Greater reality, what you are seeing is a complex interplay of electrical impulse manifestations. Result appears to your conscious mind to have been created through the cause. Actual manufacturing of the result and cause together elude you as they take place within frequencies, not within your range of translation. The illusion of what you perceive as cause and effect is a primary base code of the three-dimensional system, so what you perceive three-dimensionally will appear to follow that pattern. In greater terms, both cause and effect exist at once as part of a whole pattern, and what you see as this relationship is simply that pattern viewed in pieces. Because of the alignment of what we call your genetic time codes, you will perceive one part of the pattern first, what you know as the cause. The other part of the pattern, what you know as the effect, following it in time. Bruise and the fall exist at once as part of the same pattern, though it appears as if the fall created the bruise. In terms of greater reality, it could just as easily be said that the bruise created the fall, as each exists as part of a whole pattern in which the existence of one implies the existence of the other. We'll see the cause and effect as dictated by your genetic time codes, rather than the true construction of the entire event and the process of its manifestation. In regard to the manifestations of alterations conducted during abduction experiences, the result, implant, scar, etc., exists as part of the whole event of the process of the alterations, but you perceive it in pieces, whereas the abduction seems to have taken place in the past of your present and was responsible for the creation of the effect. What in truth has taken place is that your consciousness, in its present moment of focus, has participated in action taking place within frequency bands that are both higher and lower than those of your present moment frequency. All of these frequency bands exist at once in the ever-present now, but you perceive them strung out in linear fashion because of the arrangement of your genetic time codes. As your consciousness is fragmented into the various frequency bands, then reassembled into the frequency of your present moment focus. The genetic time codes sort and organize this electrically coded experiential data into a pattern that your conscious mind can synthesize into linear, sequential reality. The other frequency, which is conceptually synonymous with other time, events are translated, through the biology, into remembered action and the result of that action, which sets in motion the body's innate sensory projection mechanisms that create the physically observable manifestation. The important thing for you to realize is that such abduction experiences are quite real and valid, just as real as any seemingly normal event within your three-dimensional reality. Both types of events, however, employ mechanics that you are presently unaware of, but in the case of the abductions you get a little more of a glimpse as to how these mechanics operate. Understand the nature of abductions, you will begin to find a greater understanding of the nature of three-dimensional reality. Not all abduction cases involve the transmigration, movement, of the physical body through other frequency bands / time zones / dimensions. Not all human bodies are able to withstand such process. Some would be destroyed or damaged by this type of manipulation. In cases where this transmutation process is employed, the mind will at first have no recall of the events. Missing time is experienced as the body and mind reharmonize their respective rates of oscillation and build the necessary neurological and chemical structures that will allow the flow of energy between them to be reestablished. It takes time in your system for the conscious mind to catch up with the altered bodily imprint. First, the new imprint alterations do not compute within the mental body, and a mental blank spot is left until the organism rebalances itself. The mental facility integrates the new imprint. Flashes of memory will then come into conscious awareness, most often triggered through the associative process. That is, a sensory perception, sight, smell, noise, etc., will trigger the release of the new memory into awareness. Such memories can also be found through techniques like hypnosis, where the conscious mind is slightly disassociated from its focus within the present moment and is encouraged to traverse cellular memory. Then there will be memory of an odd event, missing time, a UFO sighting, or uncharacteristic emotional or behavioral reaction, etc., surrounding the event which has not yet surfaced into conscious memory. Hypnosis would then serve to assist the mind to translate and integrate more of the new imprint, bringing it to the surface of memory. The event of sequential memory of the abduction returning to the abductee marks the point of integration of the new cellular imprint. The mind has caught up with the experiences of the body, so to speak. Constitutes the return of the full consciousness, which was fragmented during the event, to the focus within the present time, or the return of consciousness to its original frequency band. Integrate the full imprint of such a multi-time event, the human organism literally manufactures new, minute neurotransmitters and nerve networks to accommodate the altered DNA imprint. Or two-dimensional time coordinate in your particular case. May eventually be able to chart the results, the portion of this activity that does take place within the three-dimensional frequency of such base code manipulations, but you will not find the cause as it exists outside of the three-dimensional frequency band in which your instruments have their being. Abduction episodes following the format just described would be considered clear-cut abductions. They are orchestrated in a straightforward manner, transmutation and alteration of form through the process of transmigration. Not all abductions are clear-cut. Clear-cut manipulations are carried out upon those who possess a biological organism that can withstand the rigors of transmigration. Most of your population, at the present time, cannot biologically endure such manipulation. Some abduction cases involve partial use of transmigration in combination with tactics of perceptual interference, whereby holographic inserts, as described in previous sections, are used to cloak the abductee's perception of the abduction event prior to the splitting of awareness and transmigration. In these cases, you will often find cover memories that will emerge in place of or in conjunction with actual memories of the abduction event. Abductees may remember seeing wolves, owls, or humans instead of aliens and spaceships. Emotional reaction to these cover images will seem out of place, however, overreactive to the seeming content. This is a clue to the possible application of cover memories and holographic inserts. This tactic is most often used to distract the subject long enough to instigate the splitting of awareness. It is a more delicate procedure in some subjects and takes more time to achieve. Inserts create a diversion from the actual events that would, of themselves, cause panic or hysteria, two conditions that can have dire effects during the splitting process. Still, other types of abductions utilize holographic inserts exclusively. They are often used to create present moment or remembered experiences of traveling aboard a spacecraft to distract the mental awareness of the abductee, while electromagnetic alterations, using kalanta, are performed on the body while it remains within the three-dimensional frequency. Transmigration would not be involved. This type of abduction usually occurs when the subject's biology cannot tolerate the transmigration of dimensional movement. Such as is the case with cattle and most other animal life indigenous to Earth. Some of your reported cattle mutilations occurred as a result of this type of experimentation. There are two primary reasons that alien abductions occur. For abductee training, though it may be difficult for you to believe, many humans have willingly agreed to participate in visitor projects. Most often these agreements were entered during the human's dream state through the subconscious facility. Many such agreements were arranged prior to birth, whereas the sole awareness of the incoming infant chose to accept as a possibility the fulfillment of a contract with souls who would not be manifesting in human form. Yes, dear humans, for those of you who are unsure, you do indeed have a soul or an identity greater than what can be held within the confines of your matter form. Refer to these contracts as soul agreements. Abductions of this kind are not intrinsically intrusive, but they may seem to be to the conscious personality who has not remembered the agreement or who has blocked the awareness of soul. Abductions involving soul agreements have many purposes. Most often the human is given information and lessons during the experience, which will then be used to assist the abductors in the greater plan upon which all have agreed. The majority of these encounters serve to assist in the positive evolution of humanity. The abductee may never consciously remember what has been learned. The information and training will motivate her on the subconscious level toward fulfilling the greater purposes for which the soul had incarnated. 2. Study, experimentation, and genetic seeding by self-serving groups such as the unenlightened Zeta. Though the abductors in these cases are not deliberately initiating harm against their human subjects, neither are they operating under a contract of consent. Many abductors view the human in a manner similar to how the human views the animal and plant kingdoms. They simply do not consider the human as an intelligent life form, but rather as a natural resource that can be used and exploited for their own purposes. Humans who have worked to build the conscious connection to soul and who have a healthy flow of the soul's energy running through them will usually not encounter such events. Often the human soul will allow for the event of violation to take place so that the individual will begin to reach for that soul connection. Humans have free will and do not have to follow the impulse of soul, though it is in the human's best interest to do so. Soul and subconscious awareness will often allow for tragedies from the personality's perspective if the personality has become so immersed in its finite identity that it blocks out cognition of and cooperation with the soul. Abductions that occur without soul agreements are a violation to the human subject. These events can be quite traumatic. You might begin to speculate about how your laboratory mice might feel at the hands of your human scientists. Human is viewed as a thing rather than a being with needs, desires, and feelings. Human genetic material is quite valuable to some ET groups, and there are interspecies breeding experiments underway, particularly within the Zeta factions. Zeta have had some success with this hybrid race, and their experimentation continues. Self-awareness and soul awareness are the human's greatest protection from abduction violation. Abductee training encounters are usually perceived by the human as traumatic until the personality moves through the fear of the unknown.
Oh, piss off.
To contact individuals or small groups of individuals that show some sign of receptivity to their intent, the result of the dimensional blend, and so they hoped that by undoing the blend and closing the mediation zone between the dimensional portals that had been forced open, that they could effectively disengage the black hole. What they did not realize is that once a hole is created, it will continue to exist until all energy that passed through it is reclaimed and restored to its original time sequence organization. They were able to close the mediation zone effectively, and when they observed the area where the hole had been, the hole was no longer there. Zeta assumed that they had closed the hole when they closed the mediation zone territories in which it had existed. This was not the case. The mediation zone had been created by merging certain frequency patterns of the third-dimensional and other dimensional versions of their planet. Frequency patterns of each were bent slightly until they came into range of each other. Then an artificial frequency splice was added to serve as a bridge between the two frequency bands. This bridge forced open an existing dimensional portal and kept it open as long as the bridge was in place. This is a manipulation process that goes against universal law, as it throws the entire time cycle of which it is a part out of synchronization with the time matrix. The black hole was still encoded within the frequency patterns of both dimensions, and when the bridge was closed, the whole pattern fragmented, changing location within the outer atmosphere of both planets. Again, it took generations to rediscover the continued existence and new location of the hole, and by this time the genetic mutations that this project had initiated began to show themselves. Knowing that the hole was responsible for their declining species, they hoped to retrieve and reorganize the lost energies so as to reverse the genetic mutation and restore health to their species. So they had the technology to seal off the hole and stop it from pulling energy. They did not do this because the hope of reversing the mutation was within retrieving the energy from the hole and permanently closing the structure. Zeta could no longer reside within their planet's atmosphere, and so they decided to evacuate and temporarily relocate to another planet within an adjacent dimension to their own, where they could continue with the project of retrieving the energies from the hole. They had not planned on anyone raiding their project, but that is what took place. Other, more advanced groups within the surrounding galaxy the danger of keeping the black hole opened. It was pulling energy at an alarming rate and posed a serious threat to the entire time matrix coordinate that was home to the Zeta and many others. Black hole was sealed, a process which took time and accelerated its magnetism. Zeta home planet and its dimensional counterpart were sucked in, leaving only a small portion of the planetary soul matrix behind within the time matrix. It is through this event that the Zeta became trapped within your system, and the others to which it had migrated. Literally homeless and rapidly declining, they had no choice but to seek other solutions. I hope that this little story about the Zeta will serve as education to your scientists who play with small particle mechanics before they have the knowledge to understand the consequences of their actions. Holographic inserts and matrix transplantation. Now we will resume our discussion about the Zeta plan to use holographic inserts and matrix transplantation to orchestrate a mental takeover of the human species. The soul robbery or forced matrix transplant occurs when the human is removed from its connection to its organic soul matrix and connected to another. For example, the cord of energy that once connected the human to the soul matrix is left hanging, so to speak. This cord spews energy from the soul matrix, just as your finger would spew blood if the tip was severed. This energy leakage is not stopped, the soul matrix itself would become depleted, as well as the energy structures that feed it, and a large buildup of energy would occur within the planetary grid. This energy buildup would follow the path of the particles carrying its code. The human who had been transplanted to another matrix structure would be natural receiver of this energy. The biological structure of the human is close-circuited into the new matrix. The energy would then be drawn into the other dimensional Earth version, or parallel universe, and to the individual residing in that system who represents the implied counterpart to the human living within your system. We'll not go into the mechanics of universal physics in this transmission, so it is enough that we say here that you have a reflection, double, or doppelganger, as some in your system call it, residing within a parallel system that represents the antiparticle to your particle. This double is often called the light body in your times, or sometimes the shadow. Both terms can be misleading, so we will use the terminology with which we are familiar. Refer to the double as the Dola imprint or Dolus for short. Other writings we will elaborate upon the Dolus and its counterpart. Now, what you need to know to follow our discussion is that the Dolus will be the recipient of that spewing energy from the forced matrix transplant. This errant energy will emerge within a portion of the double's subtle energy bodies. Humans, and other biological organisms, are connected to the soul matrix by strands or cords of energy. Cord runs from the core unit of identity for that person as held within the soul matrix, and extends outward to a sac at its end. Some in your time refer to this sac as the tissue capsule. We call it the nadial capsule or the nadis. Nadis is a literal sac of energy that surrounds your physical body. It contains all of the life force energy you will use in one lifetime as a single incarnation in time and space. The process of growth, in your terms, is the process of bringing the energies from within the nadis through into the biological form, thus expanding that form. Energy leaves the nadis and enters into the body. It must first pass through the two inner layers of the nadis. These inner nadial structures are known in your time as the mental and emotional bodies, and they give to you the qualities of being you know as mental awareness, or thinking, and emotional cognition, or feeling. 5. The errant energies spewing from the severed cord are rechanneled into the Dolus, other dimensional double, through its center point. Excess energy stimulates the opening of the center point within the Dolus. These energies then become a part of the subtle energy bodies of the double, first entering the mental area, then filtering into the emotional body. The physical body of the double does not rapidly expand, which it cannot do if blocks in the mental body are present. To accommodate the new energy, this energy will build up within the emotional body of the double as erratic electrical impulse, which will throw the emotional balance out of whack, and with it the chemical and hormonal balances within the physical body. Left unchecked, this condition will cause acceleration of the aging process as the erratic patterns block the clear flow of energy from the nadis. The double is able to reactivate the center point. located near the heart region in the physical body, somewhat to the right of the heart, and often called the heart chakra, opening the channel for new energy from the soul matrix to flow in. The new soul energy will reorganize the errant patterns, if it can get through the mental body patterns. Expanding your mind is no joke. It is a very important energy process. Soul energy will then regulate the flow of the errant energy into and through the body. In a way more harmonious to its rhythms, the energy will then pass into the nadis, where the body can draw from it within its own rhythm pattern. The double cannot reactivate the center point and connect with soul, open its energy systems to that of the soul matrix. The double will experience emotional distress and imbalance, which will lead to disease of the body and early death. In this case, there will be energy left within the nadis that the body was unable to process. Double in the other dimension, the one who received the forced matrix transplant, is no longer available to receive the energy, and so the energy becomes trapped within that dimension, where it must wait until the time cycles allow it to reintegrate with its soul matrix. The identity, individual human, for example, and its dolus, double, exist as one identity package within the soul matrix. There are 12 such identity packages within one soul matrix, each being extended into different time/space continuums within the dimensional system. Point 6. All of these identity packages, which we call aspects or tauron, exist at once within the soul matrix and time matrix, each experiencing its own line of linear development within its respective time-space location. This group of 12 constitutes the soul family, and the existence of one aspect, person, implies the existence of the other 11 aspects. Soul family, which we call the Dora, moves in cyclic fashion within the time matrix. Within those cycles, each aspect has its own smaller cycle that constitutes its passage through time, or its lifespan. There is a sequential relationship to the aspect or tauron cycles, which implies a correlation between the births and deaths of its incarnates, tauron/aspects. In the case of soul robbery through forced matrix transplant, the early demise of the double/dolus affects the entire soul matrix cycle. We call the cycles of the soul matrix the ondant cycles and the smaller aspect cycles the tauron cycles. All of the tauron are accelerated in their rhythms, and all will reach depletion of cellular energy sooner than they would have otherwise. All will thus leave residual nadial energy within their respective dimensions, which will become trapped there unless at least one of the tauron are able to activate the center point and accelerate their physical body enough to allow the residual energies of all of the other tauron to be expanded into their own nadial field. One is able to perform this feat and complete its own nadial composition, then the soul matrix can move out of the dimensional bands involved. Soul matrix can evolve in this case. Soul matrix cannot leave the dimensional octave it is in until all of its residual energies are pulled back into the soul matrix. So you can see, if the Zeta implement their plan of forced matrix transplant upon large numbers of humans, a vast number of other individuals and soul families/Dora/soul matrices will be adversely affected. Will become stuck within their positions in the time matrix and unable to evolve until those trapped energies are released. Perhaps now you will be able to comprehend the serious nature of our communications. Much is at stake within this human/Zeta drama, most of which humans do not understand. The events and practices we have mentioned in this section all have direct bearing upon the future of your system, and the plans within the aforementioned mental system are now beginning to emerge within your three-dimensional Earth system. We have explained some of the methods by which
Your day? Might be business for Yeah, but. 다시 켜줘. 아? 네, 다시 켜줘. 네, 켜줘. 왼쪽. 네. 네. What? Good night.
To its culmination in the Zeta collective mind link up through forced matrix transplant. This is the plan that humans can help to redirect by making a strong, genuine connection to their own soul matrix/Dora and learning to handle themselves within holographic inserts and Zeta abductions. These things are already going on around you, whether or not you are aware of them, whether or not you choose to believe that it is true. Those who understand can do a great deal to assist themselves, their soul families, and their fellow humans if they are willing to grow, expand, and learn. You might wonder how such a massive mental takeover could be pulled off behind your backs, so to speak. It is more so being done over your heads literally, as the manipulations involved are being conducted, to a large degree from dimensional frequency bands that are higher than the range of your perceptions. This is a plan that will take time to implement, so the sooner you are aware of these events, the sooner you will be able to redirect your future. In the following sections, we will cover methods by which you can protect yourselves from being brought under the control of the aforementioned frequency fence. We will offer suggestions as to how holographic inserts can be maneuvered and also some clues to look for that will allow you to watch the progression of the events of which we speak. In closing this section, let us leave you with one final example of how this plan will be implemented, an example that may illustrate the power of the holographic insert to persuade human perception. What do you suppose might happen if 10,000 devout Christians suddenly saw Christ float down upon a cloud, or a spaceship? The skies tremble and open, and the Savior, in the flesh, levitates down and begins to touch the heads of his beloved. Then he says, "Come with me to the promised kingdom," as a brilliant set of pearly gates appears behind him. "Follow," he utters as he turns and begins to walk through the gates. Do you think most of those devotees would say no? And who would be the wiser, except those creating the holographic insert, if those masses passed beyond the gates in ecstasy only to be marched through a dimensional portal? A portal their biological forms are not prepared to encounter. Who would mourn those people as they entered the portal and were incinerated upon contact, their bodies destroyed, and their consciousness fragmented into the ethers while onlookers watched them move joyfully through the gates of heaven? A rather ingenious way to evacuate a planet of undesirables to clear the real estate for resettlement. Even those who did not go would not believe that anything bad had happened. The masses simply went with Christ to the promised lands, as had been foretold. This is what a holographic insert can do. And some of the Zeta, the unenlightened ones following the old agenda, are quite capable of this type of travesty. Not only are they capable of this is precisely the type of holographic drama they have planned once the frequency fence is in place. If you find security in the concept of being sheep, then please, make sure you know who your shepherd is. Chapter 5, Awareness, Emotion, and Intuition Awareness. In presenting this material, we are not trying to frighten or mislead you, but we are trying to help those who are ready to become aware. Your true salvation, protection, and power will come through awareness, not through subjugation of self to illusions of outside authority. It takes courage to become aware and choose to look beyond the pat answers your culture has offered you for so long. Many of the problems presently facing humans are not created by humans alone. You have been left blind to the outside involvement that has influenced your development throughout history. Involvement of races of beings from other dimensions and other galactic origins. You presently have little idea of how drastically this involvement has influenced your evolution or how fully you have been manipulated. As long as you are unaware, you will not remember what has been stolen from you by certain of these visiting groups, the Zeta being only one member of a larger force, and that is precisely how they would like to keep the situation. Those who care about your evolution, who desire to see your species reach the freedoms, joys, and power shared by many within the universe, realize the time has come for you to be informed. And so we offer to you the information you need in your growth to awareness. Holographic inserts are a reality. This technology has been used to direct your race many times since its rebirth upon the planet Earth. Some of your historical facts are actually records of the dramas staged through holographic inserts. In the last section, we discussed the use of forced matrix transplants. This idea may seem strange to you, perhaps impossible when viewed from your present state of disinformation. It might surprise you to know that this tactic has been used upon your species in the past, and is partially responsible for your present state of unawareness. Both holographic inserts and matrix transplants can be used to assist you. In your distant past, after certain malaligned ET forces began disrupting the genetic code of your developing species, other well-intended interstellar groups decided to intervene on your behalf. Certain soul matrices or soul families agreed to birth into your three-dimensional system and take on human form so that the digressive genetic code could be redirected back toward its original pattern. Through these highly evolved beings entering your system, new probabilities for development were given to the human species. The period of time we are referring to involves a segment of linear history about 5,509,000 years ago. During this time, there occurred events of which you have no record. These events did not involve a human strain of biology, but rather numerous others from your star system and others. We refer to these events as the Electric Wars. The Electric Wars. The Electric Wars lasted in your terms about 900 years. These events were orchestrated by certain factions of interstellar cultures who desired possession of the Earth territories. Some wanted it for observational purposes, others for exploitation. The beings who originally created the Turanusium race, first human prototype, wanted these territories protected so that their experiment could again be attempted. In order to secure the Earth territories for the rebirth of the Turanusium race, its creators had to make agreements with certain interdimensional forces who possessed the power to reclaim the Earth territories. The Electric Wars began when pro- and anti-human ET factions fought over humanity's continuing right to evolve on Earth. Other dimensional forces were brought in to resolve the drama. These were not forces of a biological nature, but rather pure beings of power and awareness. Some refer to them as the Solar Lords, others call them the Great White Brotherhood. We know them as the Brno. We cannot describe to you the nature of their reality, for you presently do not have the conceptual basis for this understanding. The Brno agreed to assist certain factions of the group who had created the Turanusium prototype. The creators of the Turanusium were a large, diversified group from your universe and also from other dimensional universes. Some had more involvement in the Turanusium 12 tribes experiment than others. 2 groups from your galactic coordinate had greater interest in the experiment because of their proximity to Earth. Being part of the same intergalactic structure as Earth, their own
Oh, fuck off.
Now, remember earlier that I said agents can call agents? Well, that isn't just a one-off. Increasingly, we're
brave Isidore to his death.
galactic structure as Earth, their own realities would be affected by what transpired upon the planet. Knowing this, these groups petitioned the Brno for assistance in protecting the planet for further development. The 2 groups we are referring to here are associated with the galactic coordinates you know as the Sirian and Pleiadian star systems. In exchange for the assistance granted by the Brno, these 2 cultures agreed to allow the Brno to intervene in the 12 tribes experiment if they did not approve of the developments that took place. The Brno are concerned with the successful evolution of all life throughout the entire time matrix and interdimensional systems. They granted their assistance under the agreement that the Sirian and Pleiadian cultures would step in on their behalf and allow the experiment to be redirected should it at any time pose a threat to the intergalactic/interdimensional structures. These cultures agreed to play this role, allowing the Brno to work as overseers of the project. About 20 million years ago, the new strain of Turanusium was entered into Earth and began to develop and again digress, and the Brno petitioned the Syrian councils for intervention in the project. They did not desire to see a repetition of the previous Turanusium experiment, which caused the digression of Terra's planetary structure. At first, the Brno wanted the experiment to be ended, the species destroyed, and the sub-prototypes put out of operation. But the Syrians, on behalf of the Turanusium from the first experiment, who had evolved well in other systems, requested that instead of ending the strain, the Brno assist them once more in redirecting the strain into a more productive pattern of evolution. Many in the multidimensional structures petitioned for this intervention, and so the Brno agreed to work with them in cultivating a species that possessed greater potentials. The Brno made further agreements with certain soul matrix families that existed in dimensions more closely related to the Brno. These groups were asked to join the experiment taking place on Earth and to assist in restructuring the genetic imprint of the species. These groups entered into different time coordinates within the Earth structure and began seeding a higher mutation of the genetic code. These groups were used as the catalyst for matrix transplant. Large numbers of humans were led, through holographic inserts, into training programs that would allow for the development of intellect and greater self-awareness. Many of these early humans had already digressed to the point where their original soul matrices had become fragmented and cut off from the time matrix grid. In order for these beings to evolve out of their digression, a matrix transplant was used to repower their diminishing soul matrices. The soul families agreed to allow for this, so these were not forced matrix transplants. The soul matrix families themselves were also transplanted to other matrices that had their organization and energies intact. There were numerous host matrix families involved, all of them from other dimensional bands. Each of them had their own orientation and methods, and brought their own unique perspectives and energetic coding to the experiment. The human strain would have been lost to digression and self-termination if it had not been for this intervention. You would not be who you are today had these events not transpired. During these centuries of retraining and genetic reorganization, the humans evolved. Some were unable to make the transition successfully and became extinct in your terms. Those humans who had interbred with the animal presence indigenous to Earth had the most difficult time with reorganization. Their biologies could not undergo the transmutations involved in the development of intellect as you know it, and so they met with demise, usually due to changing environmental circumstances. Other humans, whose strain had not been overly diluted by animal interbreeding, were able to make the transition successfully. The perceptual quality you know as intellect was born during the first seeding of the 12 tribes, between 20 and 25 million years ago. Though the Brno involvement did preserve the species, and the majority of soul matrix transplants were successful, these events also created other challenges for the developing species. As mentioned in the previous section, soul matrix transplants create a variety of side effects. One such effect being the clearing of organic memory, or removal of the information stored in the original soul matrix. With this loss of memory, there's often the re-emergence of trace or ghost memory imprints, as the biological cells still hold residual electrical impulses from the original pattern. Your species is presently suffering from these effects, induced by subsequent soul matrix transplants that occurred thousands of years ago in terms of your time. As the species evolved, it was necessary for the new host matrices to create a remembered past for its newly acquired aspects in time. The genetic material that had once linked these aspects to their original soul matrices remained disassembled within the cellular structure of the body, while the host matrices manufactured new memories and new ideologies that were appropriate to the times and stage of development of the species. All of your major world religions were seeded into your culture during this time of transplanting and reorganization of the genetic code. The problem of ghost impressions or fragmented bits of original cellular memory required some framework of explanation to the developing intellect of the species. Some groups handled this problem by making these impressions off-limits to the human, teaching that these images and impressions were bad or evil and must be avoided. The intellectual facilities of the digressed human species at that time was not ready to understand concepts of genetics, thus they were not ready to comprehend the truth of their origins. By leading them away from the old memory imprints and into a focus upon the new program that the hosts were trying to instill, the humans were allowed to develop a clear linear focus of identity in time, so as to become functional within linear, present moment reality, while developing a sense of consistent linear progression of identity through time. At that time, exploring the ghost images that were surfacing from the dismantled DNA would have created such bleed-through from the old soul matrix that development of intellect would have been impossible. So in the early teachings, things were put simply. Gods and demons, the ghost images emerging from cellular memory, laws, and punishments. Portions of the truth, in diluted and symbolic form, were given to the species as self-awareness grew. Humans of the first seeding evolved under host matrix transplants until the outbreak of the electric wars 5,509,000 years ago. Matrix transplants were also used successfully during the second seeding after the close of the electric wars. Creation myths. The religions were given to you by the host matrix families, according to their particular orientation. Creation myths were provided and orchestrated through holographic inserts. Though divergent in content, these seed religions all shared practical information for day-to-day behavior that would assist the species in its evolution. Originally, all of the sacred teachings addressed the reality of the soul matrix family, the universal teachings of the Doratura as they are often called. Each of your present world religions has its common root in the ancient teachings of the Doratura. The original plan for the species, as dictated by the original Turanusium creator groups and their Brno allies, was the evolution of the species and the growth of intellect and intelligence to the point where the truth of origins could be understood. Once the new human subspecies evolved to comprehend their origins, they would be able to reassemble the dismantled DNA within their cellular structure, reorganize the actual original memory imprints, and with the help of interdimensional teachers reconnect to their original soul matrix families. For only through this connection to their original soul matrices could the species rebundle the 12-strand DNA of the first Turanusium prototype. If the 12 subspecies of humans seeded after the destruction of the Turanusium race could fulfill their genetic imprint, the biological transmutation of the species into that original superhuman Turanusium race could be achieved. Throughout time, teachings have been given to your race to assist its evolution toward that greater purpose. The teachings presently available to you contain some of the original information, but all of them have been purposely manipulated, edited, and rearranged. While there are many within the universe and the other dimensions who desire to see the fulfillment of your genetic potentials, and who are ready to welcome you as the new bearers of the Turanusium strain, there are also some who do not wish for you to achieve this. If you will recall from earlier in this section, we discussed the Electric Wars. There were numerous groups in competition for the Earth territories at that time, and it was only because of the intervention of the Brno that the Earth was protected as a forum in which the Turanusium could be reseeded and evolve. The original Turanusium had been created as a guardian creator species. Their purpose in maturity was to become conscious co-creators with other universal cultures and to serve as guardians and overseers for the evolution of the life forms upon Terra, and also for the planet itself. Can you perhaps understand why some of those groups who had interest in Earth and Terra for their own purposes would not want you to evolve back into the original grandeur that once belonged to you? If you succeed in your transmutation into your original form, the planets and their destiny will be in your hands. You will be the protectors of these territories, and it is you who will stand in the way of the other forces that desire to utilize these planets. The Brno originally chose to assist in your evolution because, if success was achieved, the best interests of the planets and their local galaxies would be served. The Brno were not supportive of the agendas of these other groups as they were primarily self-serving. If your experiment is a success, the other groups will not have access to Earth and Terra. And some of these groups cannot accept that decision. If your experiment fails, and your species proves itself unable to fulfill its role as guardian creator, the Brno have agreed to withdraw their involvement. This would open the Earth and Terran territories to other potential guardians. Though this would not be in the best interest of the evolution of the planets and their other life forms, this would be allowed, as Earth and Terra exist within a free will universe. Much hangs in the balance within your evolution, and your species has matured enough to begin to understand the truth of its lineage and the role it is intended to play. The teachings that have been given to you throughout time are intended to assist you in your evolution. Those who desire to thwart your progress, who desire to keep you within the role of unaware, subservient workers, have time and again invaded the sanctity of those original teachings. Holographic inserts have been used throughout your history to distort the teachings and confuse or mislead the species. And other attempts at forced matrix transplant have been orchestrated. We have mentioned before the concept of a frequency fence. Now we will elaborate upon this idea, explaining how it has been used to create the present state of chaos, confusion, and fragmentation within your species. Then you will begin to get an idea of what has been stolen from you, how you have been robbed of your birthright and enslaved to do the bidding of other dimensional and galactic groups that have little interest in your well-being. A frequency fence is a technology possessed by those who have a working understanding of universal physics. Through the manipulation of sound wave patterns and cycles, many things can be created, for the energy you identify as sound serves as the glue that holds together matter patterns within the time matrix. Those who are adept at manipulating sound have great power at their disposal, much greater than you can imagine. Sound directs matter, and thus anything cloaked in matter can be directly influenced by sound. The human DNA functions within a very specific pattern of frequency. This frequency directs all of the body's processes and thus the type and range of perception that can be experienced through that biological organism. If one desired to direct the focus of human perception, a knowledge of sound genetics would be needed. We have previously referred to these sound genetics as the language of energy, light and sound, the language of Kalanta. See page 22. Sound genetics are part of this language, and they have great bearing upon the human condition. What we call the Kalanta codes exist within the cellular pattern of your biology, and also within the literal strands of DNA. They represent the specific sound patterns that combine to form the frequency bands of your biological matter, and thus set the base frequency codes within which your conscious focus will take place. Depending upon the arrangement and activation of these codes, you will have either a great range of perceptual and experiential freedom or a very limited range of focus while you are within a matter-based form. When your species experienced the soul matrix transplants thousands of years ago, the DNA held certain Kalanta code patterns that were set by the host matrix families. They carefully disassembled the original codes within your DNA and replaced these electrified sound patterns with those from their own matrix organizations. Like the interior of your cells, the soul matrices and the time and energy matrices are composed and directed by these organizations of electrified sound particles. These particles are composed of units of conscious energy, and they serve as carriers of identity as well as carriers of the blueprints of matter. The patterns of your original soul matrices were left in disassembled form within the cellular pattern, but were not directly attached to the newly implemented DNA organizations that took place through the processes of the soul matrix transplants. Your original Kalanta code patterns were left within the cellular imprint so that once your species had evolved into cognition of its true lineage, you would have with you the original codes needed to reassemble your connection to the original soul matrix. Once your species became aware of these realities, it would be able to draw these patterns out of their latent and disorganized state and reintegrate them into the active DNA strands. This process of reintegration would take several centuries to complete, but in keeping the old codes stored in your cells, you would have the tools needed to begin this genetic healing. Certain key codes that would link and organize the latent codes to your active DNA structure were removed and stored within the host matrix families. In reaching a certain level of development, physically, mentally, and spiritually, the host soul matrix would then set a path of instructions for you to follow, as individuals and groups, which would lead to the retrieval of these stored key codes. Some of these instructions emerged throughout your history within the sacred texts of your major religions and belief systems. As you were led through certain progressions of earthly dramas, you were led closer and closer to the frequencies that would allow you to access the key codes and begin your process of reintegration of the latent soul matrix particles. A portion of the disassembled codes from your original soul matrices has been recently identified by your scientists, who have labeled this subparticle phenomenon junk DNA. This is no junk, but instead part of the heritage that will one day lead you back to the wholeness of your identity. The key codes of access that were removed and placed in storage were kept separate from the base imprint of your DNA, and thus out of your perceptual range, by the employment of a frequency fence. This frequency fence was created through splicing out certain configurations within the stored key codes, then linking together those portions that were taken out, disconnecting them from the stored key codes. This created a literal barrier in minute sound particles that kept your base DNA from picking up the contents of the electrified sound signals that were stored. This is a frequency fence. It is created by editing and splicing together specific portions of a frequency band that serves to remove the receivers on one end of the wave pattern and quarantine the other portions of that band, whereas the new wave pattern generated through the splice overrides the original wave structure, sending portions of it riding above this artificially created wave pattern. It is a form of frequency modulation, and when applied to the base tones, base sound units of the Kalanta codes of the human DNA, effectively creates a perceptual block by altering the electrical impulse patterns and thus the chemical and hormonal operations within the biological structure. The original frequency fence employed by the host soul matrices was used to allow you time to develop as a species, without disabling your physical bodies through excessive frequency input. The matter particles of which you were composed had to expand through time before they would be able to hold the amount of energy contained within the key codes. So as your intellect developed, so did your physical structure. A natural progression to enlightenment would have occurred had there not been uninvited intervention on the part of the groups who desire to see you fail in your evolutionary mission. If things had gone well, you would have developed more rapidly, and you would be well on your way to fulfilling your Taurenusium imprint. But instead, there were setbacks. About 1 million years ago, during the second seeding, certain of the disruptive groups began to visit your planet in hope of figuring out a way to divert your progression. Some of these beings were related to the Zeta Reticuli, and carried various types of reptilian form. They were highly intelligent, but not well suited to the Earth environment. Dragons. The group that created the most disruption within your genetic imprint was a group known as the Draken. The Draken originated from a different planetary system in your universe. When they visited your planet during several periods of the first, second, and third seedings, they created certain strains of their own species that could live comfortably within the Earth environment. Combining certain strains of reptilian life present upon your planet, they integrated their own coding into these hybrids. Your dinosaurs were originally vegetarian and quite docile in temperament. Through the Draken experiments, hybrids were created, carrying the more aggressive tendencies of that race. These were the original prototypes of your carnivorous reptiles. The Draken used their reptilian hybrids to monitor human development from their home system. About 1 million years ago, when the Draken had gained enough information through these observations, they began mutating captured humans, seeding the women through rather painful inductions carried out during their frequent visitations. The hybrids that resulted were not what the Draken had hoped for, as they could not survive within the Earth environment and had to be taken to the Draken home planet. The Draken-human hybrids are known as the Draco's reptilian race. Through experimentation upon these hybrid creatures, the Draken were able to access some of the Kalanta code particles that held in place the original human frequency fence. They poked holes in the existing fence, having no idea of the potential results of their actions, which began a process of information leakage from the host soul matrices. The human mind and body were not yet mature enough to assimilate these code fragments effectively, and the fragments began to set in motion activation of the stored original soul matrix codes, junk DNA. This created havoc within the developing human biology, as a resurgence of the ghost cellular imprints began. It was during these times that the aforementioned Zionites, time-traveling Zeta-human Ethian hybrid from the future time coordinates, first intervened, in hope of accelerating the biological evolution of the species by creating hybrids among a select group of humans. These humans were chosen randomly throughout the 12 tribes, and were imbued with the silicate matrix from the Zionite code. This allowed them to synthesize, through a course of several generations, the host matrix code patterns that had leaked through the holes in the frequency fence. During this time, the humans were taught the technologies needed for them to begin their migration underground, in preparation for the Draken Presence extermination program that was scheduled to take place. About 956,500 years ago, the cycles of the Earth pattern were approaching a time of shift, where the magnetic grid poles would partially reverse. Aware of the problem of the Draken upon Earth, the Brno agreed to accelerate this cycle slightly so the Draken monitors would be destroyed by the climatic changes that would occur with the magnetic grid shift. For several hundred years prior to the shift, populations of the Earth were moved underground, the humans as well as numerous forms of plant and animal life. Eventually you will find evidence of this historical period. When the pole shifts and resulting weather changes occurred, the Draken monitor hybrids were destroyed, and the Draken could no longer monitor and manipulate the human frequency fence, as they had depended upon their Earth extensions to carry out this manipulation. Through subsequent events, the Draco's race was banned from Earth by Guardian forces, temporarily removing the Draken problem from the course of human evolution. Through these events, the original plan of human evolution was accelerated as the Zionite crystal gene made its way into the human genetic pool. Your biblical stories of Adam and Eve bore the symbolic coloring of these events, as Eve eating the apple at the seduction of the serpent symbolically represented the Draken forced interbreeding with the human females, and the resulting opening of the host soul matrix, the symbolic tree of knowledge. It was indeed the opening of this bank of knowledge that birthed into human perception the exaggerated duality that is your lineage. The duality of perception created by the fragments of the original soul matrix memories and the new memory fragments emanating through the leaked Kilanta code fragments from the host matrix families. Two sets of memory imprints directing one body. This is part of the challenge humans of your time face in gaining sovereignty over your genetic heritage. While you remain unaware of the contents and processes within your genetic makeup, you will remain vulnerable to those who once again wish to manipulate you away from the true purposes for which you have come. Intentional distortions of sacred teachings. We will now address the issues involving the Zeta, their plan for using holographic inserts to orchestrate the mental takeover of forced matrix transplants in hope of gaining dominion over the Earth territory, and the need for humans to become aware of these events and learn how to conduct themselves within them. This invasion of mind has been planned by the Zeta and others for many, many years. You have been cultivated toward its success. Numerous attempts have been made throughout your history, by various groups, to divert you from your successful path of evolution. As we have said, Earth is a valuable piece of property in universal terms. The teachings, as seeded by the host matrix families, have been heavily distorted. Much information was removed from these writings in order to keep you unaware. Humans themselves, under the direction of these malaligned forces, have twisted and withheld key aspects of these teachings throughout your history, and there is not a single religious text within your times that has not been subjected to these manipulations. For this reason, much new information is being offered, but even with contemporary translations, you must watch for these intended distortions. Through the distortions in your traditions, you have been taught to disown personal power, to deny your perceptions, and to perpetually distract yourselves from looking inward to the knowledge that lives within your connection to the host soul matrices that now serve as the organizational structures for your fragmented genetic code. These distortions in teachings have served to further rob you of the ability to link with the soul matrix and instead have cultivated you to adhere to the dictates of outside figures of authority. As we have said, your species has been cultivated for the success of a mental takeover, and you are presently suffering from just that sort of takeover, as most of you have little idea of how to connect to the soul matrix. In previous sections, we mentioned the brainwashing program. This program was set in motion by those factions desiring your failure, and they have done a good job in coloring your perceptions to hold prejudice against the very information that would set you free to grow and evolve successfully. Through your traditions, you have been taught to obey, to follow blindly the ideas others have handed to you, and to fear and mistrust the very nature of your humanity. You have been taught that you were powerless and unworthy, and that your bodies were somehow wretched and unclean. These were not the original teachings. The manipulators utilized portions of the original teachings, distorting them, steering you away from the secrets held within your bodies, feeding you the erroneous idea that you could connect with your soul by disowning the body, when in truth you must connect with the soul matrix through the biological form. The teachings were twisted to make you believe that you could find God by searching outside of yourselves, or by appeasing some self-appointed authority figure who had the power to hold your divinity for you. You were led to follow the letter rather than the spirit of the law, and the laws you were taught to follow had been purposely misinterpreted so the individual could not make a personal connection to source. At one time, during the early development of the species, when the adepts were working to nurture the intellectual facilities and repress the ghost memories, many of these teachings were pertinent. The mental capacity of the human at that time could not sustain the burden of certain knowledge, and so you were steered away from that knowledge. But this was only meant to be temporary. Instead, through the manipulations of those repressive forces, you were kept in darkness far beyond your time. Information was withheld even after you had matured enough to integrate it effectively. You could compare your species to a child who was not allowed outside because he could only crawl and harm might come to him. But long after that child was able to walk, the freedom of the outside world was denied. For perhaps now the child could walk away. Perhaps in his maturity, the child would no longer follow the commands of the parent. And so it has been with the development of your species. Though some of this denial could be attributed to overprotective parenting, to use an analogy, much of it was orchestrated in order to keep you helpless and subservient to those parent figures. Not all of these parents agreed that you should be allowed to mature, and those who did not became the forces working toward your demise. Who were those parent figures that nurtured you in time from innocent beings of pure perception into the thinking beings of complexity you have become in your present time? The group of interstellar and multidimensional beings, of which the Syrian and Pleiadian cultures are a part, who originally began the Turanusium experiment so long ago. And the multitude of species from other galaxies who originally donated their genetic imprint at the inception of this experiment. They are your ancestors and your true forefathers and mothers, who raised you from the infancy of a new species into the adolescence of your present stage of development. And those ancestors are alive, not only within the genetic imprint that you carry, but also within their own time and dimensional continuum. They are aware of you, and they guide you still, for unlike you, they are not trapped within their own time-space coordinate. These parents have protected your species for hundreds of thousands of years. From the manipulators who desired to steal your nursery out from under you, and from the other parent species who wanted to redirect the path of your evolution to fulfill their own purposes. You were protected in your growth, and you are still. But you are becoming wise. Wise enough to take a hand in your own protection and in the fulfillment of your genetic heritage. Presently the Zeta are toying with you. This scheme has already been redirected to a large degree, but will remain a threat to you until are able to see your way clearly through the manipulations they have in store. Earth seeds and star seeds. The mavericks among you, the pioneers, will lead the way in your awakening to awareness and empowerment. They will lead your species to the discovery and fulfillment of its genetic plan. They are the silent leaders of your time, the speakers sent to you by the ancient ones, through whom the knowledge of the original truths will come. Some of you carry within you the assembled codes of your original soul matrix. Some of you evolved beyond the need of the host matrix families because long ago you were gifted with the silicate matrix. There are those among you now who carry the crystal gene. They are on the accelerated path of evolution, and knowingly or unknowingly, will lead your species to freedom. They are the starseeds. Are you one of them? The members of your species that were not imbued with the gift of the Zionites, who do not carry the silicate matrix within their junk DNA and soul matrix codes, are known as the Earth Seeds. Though all of your species originated from the 12 tribes of the Turanusium subprototype, not all of you were selected for the Zionite experiments and resulting accelerated genetic strain. The original selection of the first encounter was random. This does not mean that one group is superior to the other in terms of innate value, as all of you are needed for the fulfillment of the Turanusium imprint. But the starseeds are ahead of their time, so to speak, and so they carry with them the burden of the sleeping Earth seeds, and the responsibility of helping them to awaken. The Earth seeds are still connected to the host matrix families. They have not yet activated the Kalanta codes that would allow them to begin assembly of their original memory patterns. Many of them have not yet passed through the original frequency fence that would allow the reassembly process to begin. These humans are the most vulnerable to manipulation through holographic inserts, and it is some of these that the Zeta desire to utilize for the breeding of a worker race. The plan for the selected Earth seeds involves the eventual contamination of food, water, and air supply with certain elemental components that would repress the emotional facilities and thus cut off the possibility of the individuals to link with their host matrix families. A biological block to the frequencies of the host matrices. Those who are not selected are intended to be removed through dramas created by holographic inserts, such as the Christ drama example we used in the previous section. The Zeta have other plans in mind for the starseeds. The silicate matrix within the starseed genetic imprint is valuable to the Zeta. It is this element for which they search during unauthorized, by the soul matrix, abductions, for they hope to create a stronger, more versatile hybrid through humans carrying this code. They view the starseeds as the potential breeders of a three-dimensional Earth hybrid race that they hope will repopulate the planet once the clearing is completed. The unenlightened Zeta also fear the starseeds, as they possess the potential ability of seeing through the holographic inserts. The starseeds also are able to more easily partake of multidimensional communication, which enables them to go above the frequency fence the Zeta are working now to erect within the human DNA code. Remember, the frequency fence is a type of sound technology that utilizes contrived frequency modulation. Because the starseed is already relinked, to some degree, to its original soul matrix, the Zeta cannot perform a forced matrix transplant upon a starseed without first dismantling the soul matrix. This is very difficult to do with the technology they have available. And the starseeds are protected multidimensionally by the Zionites, as well as by other groups, Enlightened Zeta, Ethian, Ranthia, Syrian, Pleiadian, Brno, and many other presences. The starseeds are the greatest threat to the old Zeta agenda, and so the Zeta try to find other ways in keeping them out of operation. Zeta do whatever possible to keep the starseed from awakening to its true identity. A sleeping starseed is not a threat, and is primed for manipulation. Much of the brainwashing program has been employed to keep the starseeds sleeping through distraction and fear of their own identities as appearing out of the norm. They have also instigated a campaign to create separation and segregation between the starseeds and earthseeds, and also between starseed groups, thereby exerting social pressure upon the awakening individuals. The Zeta and the interior governments have also pushed in certain places and in certain times within the medical communities. The movement to discredit holistic therapies, and to use drugs for the treatment of emotional conditions not of a psychotic nature, the prejudice within the psychiatric professions towards spiritual or paranormal experience, the repression of women's issues and minority rights, all of these things are fueled by Zeta agitation in the right places at the right times. The Zeta and interior also infiltrate religious communities when needed, to ensure that the factions will remain at odds, to ensure that humans will not band together in tolerance. For that would be, and will be, the demise of the old Zeta agenda. You would not believe the issues within your public forum that have come under Zeta/interior influence at one time or another. Why do you think issues of UFO sightings are repressed and censored from the media whenever possible? Who supports the networks? Advertisers, of course. Who might be influencing conglomerates behind the scenes? Perhaps a few little gray shadows? Women. Presently the Zeta and the interior government are backing a strong campaign against women. It is being orchestrated subtly, smoothly, so as to go unnoticed. But the programming is present. Playing upon women's innate love for and bonding with their offspring, the interior movement is aimed at reconditioning women to view themselves as breeders first. Rather than supporting the development of the female identity as a balanced force, these subliminal campaigns are playing upon women's guilt, coercing them to feel incomplete if they do not breed, and to feel they must martyr personal identity in order to be good parents. Women are being programmed to mistrust their bodies and especially their emotions. Both men and women have been programmed to repress their emotions and to mistrust their intuitions. It just so happens that the emotional and intuitive facilities are the primary means by which humans can see through and break out of holographic inserts. Have you ever thought about the deeper messages being sent to you through your media? You must understand that the old Zeta agenda calls for women as breeders and men as workers in the orchestration of planetary repopulation. Is it any wonder that they would support and encourage these traditional values? Who do you think might have helped your species to develop traditional values that serve to segregate the genders, pitting them against each other in a power struggle, rather than uniting them in co-creative partnership as they were intended? The idea of traditional values has been purposely promoted to you in distorted form. It has been promoted with an implied subjugation of the female role. This distortion was started thousands of years ago to keep the wisdom of the united genders out of human perception. And the Zeta are now playing upon those themes to further divide you and keep you stuck within the old fragmented genetic imprint. Until you overcome these issues, and the petty power struggles they breed, you will not know what freedom is. The traditional roles of the genders were originally intended as a co-creative structure, built upon mutual respect and personal freedom. They were optional roles, not intended to be socially imposed. Men or women who did not want to play these roles to each other and within the society had other legitimate options to choose from. This is not the case within your present world societies. You have allowed yourselves to be robbed of a precious freedom. Only you, as individuals, can return that freedom to yourselves. Soul Matrix Protection. The first and most important thing you can do to protect yourself from holographic inserts and forced matrix transplants is to open your mind and belief system to the reality of the presence of the soul matrix. Whether you are earth seeds or star seeds, the fact that you exist implies the existence of the soul matrix, either the host soul matrix of the earth seeds or the original soul matrix of the star seed. Once you have acknowledged the existence of the matrix, then actively petition this soul family/identity grouping to assist you in strengthening this connection. Reserve some time each day for meditation or prayer, whichever idea you are most comfortable with, in which you focus your attention on making this connection and develop the skill of quieting your mind and body. Find the place of peace within you. This does exist and can be found, and center yourself there for at least a few minutes daily. Choose to evolve consciously and ask your soul matrix to assist you in ways you can understand. Reach for the higher knowing within your soul matrix, and it will guide you. Begin to review your emotional reality and sensitize yourself to those areas of repression. Begin to work through your fears, inviting your soul matrix to assist you. Working with the soul matrix directly can often accomplish more in 1 week than years of psychotherapy, although therapy can be a useful tool when used wisely. Make a commitment to developing your spiritual awareness, and know that if you learn to look within effectively, you have all that you need to spiritually grow. Your spirit is your soul matrix, and you are never without it. The second most important thing you can do to avert holographic inserts is to join together in tolerance with the other members of your species. The Zeta and the interior government use the concept of divide and conquer, so be aware and begin to deprogram yourselves from common ideas you may hold that serve to divide rather than unite people. Outgrow your own prejudice and begin to see the common elements between peoples instead of the differences. Work with your own beliefs and emotions as individuals and come together in groups to support world harmony, peace, and brotherhood. Observe your traditional beliefs for a time and choose to uphold only those that promote tolerance between people, respect for all life forms, even the bad guys, whomever they may be, and trust of the life force or soul within you. Be wary of ideologies that steer you away from creating a personal relationship with a higher power and substitute hero worship of authority figures for a private relationship to the spiritual aspects of your being. Support each other in your growth to spiritual awareness, regardless of what path you take, and do not fall into the trap of condemning others who do not view spirituality the way you do. Become committed to holding a higher vision of brotherhood for the people of the planet, and a vision of balance for the planet itself. Become the guardian you were created to be, and help others to do the same. These are a few things you can do to begin learning the processes necessary to put yourself out of range of holographic inserts. If the Zeta have a hard time using the inserts to direct the populace because the people have become skilled at directing their minds, the Zeta will not be able to fulfill their desire of forced matrix transplant into the Zeta Mind Collective. Humans have the power to stop this nightmare before it goes any further. Perceptual freedom is a precious gift. If you are wise, you will not allow it to be stolen from you without a fight. Emotion. Human emotion is the key to human salvation, for it is through the perceptual structures of the emotional facility that truth can be discerned. Holographic inserts cannot be detected through the logical mind, mechanical instrumentation, as possessed within your present level of technology, or the five-sense perceptual data you are accustomed to using. These inserts, however, can be felt, sensed through the emotional and intuitive facility, and can be detected through the use of higher sensory perception, HSP. HSP involves using the seven senses of the human organism that exist at a higher frequency than the five identified senses with which you are familiar. Because these sense facilities themselves exist within the higher frequency bands of the human bioenergetic field, they are able to bring in and translate, through the Kalanta codes, higher frequency data. Some can translate ultra-low frequency also. The energy that links the human to its soul matrix is high-frequency energy. The higher senses of HSP are the facilities used to translate soul matrix information, through the body, into the human awareness. Holographic inserts are broadcast within a certain frequency range, in your case, the range of the average, or mean, of the five-sense human perceptual range, outside of which the matter illusion of the hologram begins to deteriorate. To create mass holographic inserts, the Zeta have to create a frequency fence, by manipulating the Kalanta codes within the human DNA using sound, that blocks out the higher and lower frequency bands, sealing in the human perceptual range to the frequency bands used in the insert, thus disengaging the individual's ability to translate soul matrix data through the body and into conscious awareness. The development of HSP is part of the human evolutionary path, and the body's ability to process the higher frequency information is just emerging into your species on a mass level. Certain Kalanta codes must be activated by energy impulsed from the soul matrix to set in motion the latent codes, within the junk DNA, that will direct the body, through its electrical, chemical, and hormonal structures, to translate the higher frequency information. Until these latent codes are activated, the higher and lower frequency energy will simply fall through the gaps within the nerve synapses. The electrical, chemical, and hormonal changes created by the latent code activations literally add new impulse receivers to the neurological structure and strengthen the nerve fibers to be able to carry a larger load of electrical impulse. Without these alterations, the human body cannot translate frequency that is outside its translational range. To increase perceptual range, the body must be accelerated in its ability to hold and process electrical data. And these accelerations are carried out through Kalanta code activations orchestrated by the soul matrix according to its inherent cyclical rhythms. This process exists as a natural dynamic of human evolution and is the process by which you evolve over time. These Kalanta code activation processes can be accelerated through conscious applications of Kalanta science. The Zeta and the interior government are aware of this emerging aspect of human evolutionary development, and desire to stop this particular ability from surfacing within the species. If humans evolve naturally, these intrinsic abilities would put humans out of range of mental manipulation. The Zeta chose this period in time to intervene, precisely because of the stage of evolution humans are currently within. Their plan cannot be fulfilled if humans, on a mass level, develop the perceptual abilities and resulting knowledge that would result with the natural evolution of the HSP. And so they enter your time, coordinate, and simultaneously stage infiltrations at key points within your past with the intention of severing the natural development of your abilities, thus splicing you into the Zeta collective mind matrix before your emerging abilities allow you to make a strong conscious connection to your own or host soul matrix. Once you have developed the ability to hold a greater amount of soul matrix frequency within your cellular structure, the Zeta will no longer be able to manipulate you to the degree that they presently do. They do not have the technology or power to dismantle the soul matrix families of a large collective. There would be too much interference by the helping groups that exist within the soul matrix levels of reality. In order to infiltrate your planet, the Zeta must bring the human collective under their direction before that collective evolves to a full embodiment of the soul matrix. And it is your responsibility as humans to not allow this to occur. The time cycles of human evolutionary development are not set in stone, so to speak. Though there are certain set cyclic patterns that govern the movement of the galaxies, planets, and all life forms within those systems as they spiral throughout the time matrix, there is some flexibility within these set cycles. Under certain conditions, accelerations in evolution can take place within any of these cycles, and an acceleration within one system will have a reciprocal effect upon the cycles within related systems. Holographic inserts are presently posing a threat to your population, even though most of you have no idea this technology exists, and the development of your HSP is your primary insurance for neutralizing that malaise. The Zeta desire to rob you of your evolutionary birthright to HSP, as well as removing your freedom of effective choice through clear perception. Though the abilities of HSP are only now beginning to surface within your masses, the development of these abilities, through the acceleration of your evolutionary imprint, can be achieved. There are methods you can use as conscious individuals to begin this evolutionary acceleration. You do not have to be a spiritually oriented person, or religious, to understand the premises of which we speak and employ the technologies we will offer to you. You do not have to enjoy esoteric philosophies, or practice ritualized ceremony to understand and develop a working relationship with the soul matrix. The soul matrix is a scientific phenomenon as well as a spiritual reality. It could be viewed as a naturally occurring structure within the manifestation of life force patterns, much as is the observable structure of your DNA and cellular patterning. Spirituality is simply the portion of true, universal science that you do not as yet understand, for science is truly the mechanics of consciousness and its manifestations, and consciousness is the true spiritual essence of the universe, and all life forms contained within it. The Zeta-controlled society. At a later time in other transmissions, we will provide more information for you on the conscious acceleration of the evolutionary imprint and the development of HSP. The threat of holographic inserts in the Zeta forced matrix transplant is a reality within your system for the time period spanning the next 75 to 100 years, 1997 through 2072 to 2097, primarily within the next 50 years, 1997 through 2047. After that time, because of the larger evolutionary cycles of which Earth is a part, the Zeta plan will either have met with success or failed. Humanity's ability to overcome its present vulnerability to holographic inserts and accelerate its own evolutionary process will be the primary factor in determining the outcome of these events. If the old Zeta agenda does succeed, humans will be unaware of this, as the majority will be transplanted into the Zeta collective mind matrix by this time, and will be programmed to see only the status quo and the permanent holographic structures held in place by the collective program. If they succeed, there will seem to be improvements in many areas, such as health and healthcare, environmental restoration, and economic stability that would appear through the use of a centralized, electronically mandated world banking system that regulates the flow and conversion of plastic money on a global scale through a centrally located computerized network that is Zeta operated. Humans will have no idea that the Zeta, and the primary 13 corporations that they covertly direct, are behind these institutions. It is this invisible Big Brother network that your biblical prophecies of the One World Order are referring to. There is a big difference between a free, united global collective and a centrally managed network of covert regulatory systems. There will be well-organized spiritual congregations with powerful, authoritative leadership, who will indoctrinate specific ideological interpretations of traditional and New Age theologies. Miraculous happenings will become commonplace and things will seem much better than they are in your present times. Humanity will seem to be reaching new heights as the Zeta covertly assist the species and the planet to fulfill greater visions of achievement. Then the Zeta will begin to infiltrate their new high-achieving hybrids into the populace and systematically begin the extermination of the genetically undesirable humans. In the Zeta-controlled society, you will notice a marked drop in the interest in HSP and ideologies that would lead to its implementation, and a rapid advancement of technological development. These attributes of the Zeta society might seem seductive, as through the holographic programs you would seem to be living more comfortable lifestyles than you had ever known. But if you were able to see, which illusion of your soul matrix and of the planet that existed in reality behind the hologram, you would not be seduced. You would also notice, in the Zeta society, a large increase in emotional and psychological problems. As we mentioned before, forced matrix transplant has its drawbacks, which will be chemically treated through drug therapy. A new mental disorder will emerge wherein the individual will seem to flip between a multitude of identities, unable to keep consistent focus of identity in time. Chemical imbalances within the body systems will be found and viewed as the cause of the difficulties, when in truth the chemical imbalances and resulting perceptual distortions will both be the symptoms of the forced matrix transplant. There will also be an increase in subtle memory disturbances that resemble senility, but that occur within a wide range of the population. Certain elements will be placed in the water systems of many countries for purification purposes that will serve to avert some of these symptoms of the forced matrix transplant and assist the human body in remaining within the controlled frequency structure by repressing the emotional systems. These would be some of the earlier indications that the Zeta plan had succeeded. If humans are able to effectively accelerate their evolution and develop the HSP senses to some degree, creating stronger connections to their soul matrices, before the frequency fence that would scramble those higher frequencies is in place, the unenlightened Zeta will be unable to fulfill their objectives. In this event, they would either depart to other systems or join with their fellow Zeta, or working with the Ethian and others toward enlightened brotherhood. Some of the interior government forces would remain, but without the advantages of power and knowledge provided by their Zeta cohorts, their power to manipulate would be diminished. They would remain, continuing their covert tactics, awaiting another potential opportunity to reactivate the old plan. However, the immediate threat to the species would be removed and the opportunity for growth would be extended. The Free Society. Just as there would be observable indications that the Zeta plan had succeeded, there would also be indications that the plan was abandoned. First, the most notable sign would be an increase in reported instances of UFO sightings, alien encounters, and communication transmissions. Though the old belief paradigm, still colored by the brainwashing program, will exist, many new outlets and appearances of new belief models will manifest on a global basis. The long journey of healing ideological differences into a common position of brotherhood through tolerance will emerge. New discoveries will be made in the areas of health that will be made available to the masses. Seemingly miraculous advancements in holistic healing will come into view, helping to mend the rift between traditional medicine and contemporary holism. Many new technologies, using the sciences of light and sound, will be created and applied to health, social, economic, and environmental problems, and much headway will be made in finding solutions. Though you will see many of the same features present within the Zeta Society, at least for some time, the feeling beneath them will be different. A sense of lightness or absence of tension will be present. More and more individuals will begin rediscovering their spiritual orientation and make efforts to accelerate their development. Through these groups, strong support systems will emerge within the economic structures of many countries. Companies will be redesigned to allow for the healthy development of families with home work opportunities and flexibility of hours made readily available. Many large companies will downsize, creating instead a greater number of smaller corporations that work in a cooperative rather than competitive framework. People will begin to take responsibility for their own health care, using the increased spiritual and scientific knowledge available. A turn toward energy medicines or Kalanta therapeutics will bring self-directed health and healing into the lives of the masses, and large groups of emissaries representing these technologies will travel globally, sharing their knowledge with third-world citizens so they may begin their own healing processes. There will be restructuring in the governments on all levels, and there may be several decades of apparent strife on smaller levels as the people reclaim power within their governments and begin to create the social and political changes needed to open a future of brotherhood. There will be periods of instability within every country as the new ideas that promote successful evolution sweep through the collective conscience of the race, and people will unite through environmental and humanitarian issues. Earth changes in certain locations will occur as the energies of Earth, like that of its people, reach for higher ground. The Age of Enlightenment will dawn and bring with it many awesome and wonderful surprises. Freedom will be the purpose and the process of these times, and your species will grow and prosper through the knowledge that will come into your system. The old ways will grow side by side with the new, merging into a new perspective that has brotherhood as its core and peaceful co-creation as its objective. Within approximately 50 years, the enlightened Zeta and other ET groups working for the advancement of the human species will make their presence known to large numbers of people and begin forming cooperative relationships of learning with the humans who desire this interaction. Abductions will no longer take place as the visitors will be able to extend invitations rather than operate beyond the conscious awareness of the people. Those responsible for the non-consented abductions will have left your system. It will be a great age indeed, far different from the repressed robotic-like existence of holographic reality with covert, centralized control. Your species will make the final decision as to which reality it will see by the choices made within your present time. Choose well. This choice will be finalized in 2017 AD, through events extensively described in Voyagers 2, Secrets of Amenti, and Voyagers 3, The Angelic Dossier. Many rewards await you if you choose to grow consciously, as in the development of HSP. Your perceptual field will expand along with your abilities to synthesize a greater range of frequency. You will discover many wonderful things about the world you live in, things that entirely escaped your view before. As you begin to look at your world in a new way, you will also begin to view yourselves in a new light and reclaim some of the limitless aspects of your being that allow joy to touch you as the life force moves through you. Not only will the choice of accelerating your evolutionary path protect you by giving you the tools you need to avert holographic inserts and forced matrix transplants, it will also bring to you a whole new magical world of perception to explore. And in this new frontier you will find the solutions to many of your present challenges, both personally and as a human collective. Development of emotion. The starting point for development of the higher senses is emotional awareness. For centuries your cultures have taught you to repress, disown, and negate emotional reality and experience. Your species has developed a prejudiced perception in this regard, in which the physically verifiable impressions brought to you by your 5 identified senses are considered superior to the more subtle impressions of emotion and intuition brought to you by your higher sense facility. Emotion contained a power, which seemed to possess a life of its own. This power of emotion was perceived as a threat to the developing intellect, for the intellect could not comprehend the reality through which emotion occurred and so could not bring this mysterious power under conscious direction. In the early days, when the 12 tribes were being trained to develop the intellectual perspective, the blocking of emotional sensation was a tool used in order to assist the developing human to focus his 5 sense perceptions outwardly into the objective matter world. Emotion worked a bit differently then, serving as a form of instinctual response such as is apparent in your present-day animals. The instinctual response served to bring data directly from the soul matrix into the cellular consciousness, bypassing the mind as you think of it, creating an interactive response mechanism through which the organism would receive direct impulse from soul that would direct it toward the action in time necessary for the organism's survival. The organism would not have to think about or choose appropriate action responses, as they would come automatically from the soul matrix. As long as an organism, be it animal, human, or other life form, had a strong instinctual impulse, it would remain under the full control and direction of the soul matrix. Such beings would not operate out of free will, nor would they possess a sense of personal individuation, but would rather function as individual units of a collective. The human was intended to become a sentient, self-motivated being, capable of choice and conscious co-creation with the soul matrix, rather than an unthinking extension of the soul matrix. So in those early times, the instinctual response of emotional cognition was partially dismantled. This involved deactivating certain Kalanta codes within the DNA pattern, which created a sense of separation from soul for the developing human. The separation allowed for a clearer focus in time and matter, through which the intellect could evolve and from which individualized identity emerged. As with many of the other disengaged codes, those from from the original soul matrices that existed prior to the host matrix transplants. These instinctual emotive codes were stored within the cellular pattern and the soul matrix. A small portion of them were left in operation, giving the human access to small amounts of soul matrix data and serving to provide enough instinctual basis to ensure appropriate action in regard to survival of the organism. These remaining codes became the basis for your fight or flight biochemical reaction response. The stored emotive codes, along with others, were kept with the human within the cellular structure, so as the organism evolved, those codes could once again be reassembled and integrated into the awareness of the growing consciousness. As humans evolved through time, certain code patterns would be activated by impulse from the soul matrix, and yet another stage of growth would be set in motion. Through these processes of Kilanta code activations, your species expanded from its earlier digressed forms of relative simplicity into the complexity of the present intellectually focused form that you carry. As you grew, so did your ability to synthesize emotional frequency, and greater amounts of these latent codes were brought into activation as you progressed through time. Great power and awareness is stored within these latent code particles, and it is this power that the maturing intellect sensed as it began to observe and define the quality of perception you call emotion. To the growing intellect, emotion appeared to be chaotic, unreliable, and suspicious. The intellect had developed into the logical reasoning power you presently use to decipher reality, but that logic used the assimilation of data from only the 5 senses that you presently know. The sense data and awareness brought in by the 7 other higher senses, or high-frequency senses, was blocked from the logical mind by the biological organism, whose physical apparatus did not possess the mechanisms needed for this higher sense data to be synthesized into patterns. That apparatus would not evolve into the physical structure until the latent codes were activated by the soul matrix. So logic developed, but it was at a disadvantage, as the pool of information from which it had to draw conclusions was limited by the biological immaturity of the human form. Frog in a fishbowl. To use an analogy, logic developed as a frog in a fishbowl, whereas in its youth it could swim around in circles within the confines of its limited environment, but could not remove itself from that environment to discover the world which existed beyond the glass. Viewing the world it could see beyond the glass, the world seemed threatening, as the shapes and forms our frog could see made no sense. The frog presently had no experiential basis with which those mysterious forms could be correlated and understood. In its youth, the frog did not possess the physical apparatus that would allow it to escape from its fishbowl and explore the odd environment it could see beyond. Without activation of the Kilanta code patterns stored in the cells, the physical body of the human did not have the ability to expand its perception beyond its 5-sense world, nor was the human able to make sense of the strange new world of emotional impulse using the limited conceptual basis the 5 senses provided. As our frog grew, and legs began to sprout where once were fins, the frog discovered it now had the ability to leap out of its comfortable bowl and explore the strange world outside of the glass. As the human biology evolved, the neurological and physiological structures of the body grew, new Kilanta code sequences were activated, and the body could now begin to synthesize greater amounts of the latent emotional codes. The logical/intellectual mind could begin exploring the world of emotional impressions that were emerging into its awareness. But instead of leaping, our frog became afraid, choosing instead to swim around in circles within its ever-shrinking bowl, closing its eyes to the world that flashed by around it. As your species reached the point of biological development that would allow the emotional aspects of reality to be explored, the logical mind chose instead to remain within its limited environment of ideas, and pretend away the emotional impressions that were emerging more and more into conscious awareness. As long as our frog refuses to explore the world outside the bowl, it will not discover that it is fully equipped to make sense of that environment, and it will remain captive within the bowl with very little room to move or grow. The free world beyond will remain unavailable. If the human species continues to repress and negate the emotional aspects of its being, which it is now biologically capable of synthesizing, the logical mind will never discover the freedoms that exist beyond the limits of its present ideas. The human will remain trapped within the bowl of duality and 5-sense perception, unable to grow beyond the conditions created through that five-sense orientation. The species will never become fully human as long as it cuts off from logical awareness the reality of the seven higher senses. If the species is to evolve to fulfill the imprint and role for which it was created, it must become fully human. And this requires integration and synthesis of the latent Kalanta codes that give you the quality of perception you call emotion. In the infancy of intellect, it was appropriate for awareness to be placed within its tiny fishbowl of simple ideas, where it could grow and develop safely. But the fins have evolved into legs, in terms of our analogy, and the human logic still closes its eyes to the world of emotion and intuition. Afraid to leap, afraid to chart the territories of emotional cognition that exist beyond the glass of polarized perception. Human logic, at its present state of evolution, continues to try and comprehend that magical world within the limited confines of its own experiential memory. And like our frog, human logic will never comprehend the true reality of the world beyond the glass until it leaps out of the safe little bowl of beliefs it has been functioning within since its infancy. The logical mind and intellect were intended to work together, bringing you a more accurate perception of reality than either could alone. The five-sense perception of the logical mind brings only half of the picture, so you will never understand the true nature of yourselves or your world if you do not put that partial picture together with the other pieces that exist within your emotional heritage. You cannot understand emotion by using the logical facilities alone. How long will you remain as frogs in a fishbowl, swimming around in circles of incomplete logical reasoning? Emotion has its own logic, methods of synthesizing energy and ideas that are unique unto itself. The logic of the mind will bring you conclusions, whereas the logic of the emotions will bring you cognition. Without that cognition, operating subconsciously through the emotive facilities, your logical conclusions would make no sense to your conscious awareness. When you cut off emotional cognition from logical perception, you create an artificial boundary within your identity and conscious awareness. The emotional codes stored within cellular structure were intended to be reassembled and reorganized, as impulsed by the soul matrix, as you evolved through time. As these codes were restructured and assembled into the operative codes of your DNA, your conscious awareness would receive an ever-expanding picture of reality and cognition. The illusionary perceived separation between the conscious biological self and the soul identity would diminish as the codes were progressively assembled, allowing greater amounts of energy, identity, and awareness to filter into the physical body and intellectual consciousness. As the latent codes reassembled, the old instinctual imprint of the early human would be combined with the newly developed logical facility, creating a new perceptual modality that would allow for full soul matrix cognition to embody within a physically manifest system. If your evolution had moved along as planned, following the impulses generated through the soul matrix cycles, your physical form and your logical conscious awareness would have merged with the soul identity, creating a fully cognizant being in flesh. But your evolution did not proceed as intended, and there were setbacks, due in part to the manipulation of your genetic code by other ET forces. The violence mutation. At different periods in your evolution, these forces entered your reality, creating distortions within the electrical impulse patterns being sent by the soul matrix. These distortions serve to further jumble the Kalanta code particles within your cells, disrupting the original code activation sequences. There was originally specific order to the dismantled Kalanta codes, and their activation sequences were scheduled, so to speak. This order allowed for a clear pathway for energy to follow from the soul matrix into the biological form. The distortions created by the activities of numerous ET groups threw this innate order out of whack, so to speak, and the emergence of emotional impressions no longer followed the appropriate sequence. Codes were fired that did not have their counterpart receivers within the operating DNA, and the energy released by these code firings could not be filtered into the biological organism. Instead, this errant energy began to pool within the higher frequency sense facilities, distorting the natural order of those structures. The distortions emerged into the conscious awareness as errant emotional impulse, creating
Yeah.
overly aggressive and inappropriate emotional
Yeah.
reaction patterns that
Yeah.
entered into the
Mm.
body through the existing fight
Yeah.
or flight
What?
code structures
Ahmed,
that had been in
what?
operation.
Ahmed, what?
The fight or flight
Can you
instinct
break
pattern
down,
became
yeah?
overburdened with
Ahmed,
these unorganized
Ahmed,
electrical
what?
impulses,
Ah.
and the chemical and hormonal process of the body became unbalanced, creating the propensity for violent behavior now apparent within your human strain. As this sequence interruption occurred within the cellular imprint and was put online through the operative fight or flight codes in the DNA, this distortion was genetically passed on through your species lineage, appearing in sporadic and random manifestations of biological mutation and psychological malalignment. The soul matrix, in an attempt to override this undesired mutation, reactivated more of the latent Kalanta codes with the intention of accelerating the body's development so the errant codes could be cleared by linking them to sequences already operative in the DNA. What this translates into in terms of the development of your conscious awareness is yet another perceptual mode through which these additional energies could be synthesized. The birth of intuition began as the intuitive facility was added into your biological structure. The intuitive facility serves as a bridge between the original emotive codes and the divergent impulses arising from the mutation. Through the intuitive facility, emotion